Hello, everyone. Welcome to our December 15th webinar, The Roles of Narratives and Storytelling in the Math Classroom, featuring James Oliver. We haven't had him in a while, but we have him back today. We're very excited. I hope everyone's school year is winding down and kids aren't being too crazy and students are being wonderful and engaged this time of year. I hope that for all of you. While we wait for people to trickle in, some icebreakers. Please tell us where you're from, what do you teach, and what made you want to join this webinar today? What are you hoping to get out of it? What would you like to learn? Or what would you like us to do in the future? Whatever you'd like to say, drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
Wow, look at this. We already have a decent turnout, and it's not even a full guest list here yet.
Very exciting.
I always get nervous when I see these people that are transcribing and getting this webinar so they can read it later, just because then not only will they possibly watch the recording, but then they're going to actually read how bad my dad jokes are.
I know you better watch what you say, better deliver those punchlines.
Also, like, what if the bots out there don't actually do a good job of telling my joke? Then it's like,
yeah,
the
a
only
lot of stuff to worry about now as a presenter.
Yeah. The only child in me is just wanting to make sure that all of my jokes get off somewhat here. Look at where all these people are at. Oh my goodness.
I know. Some helpful tips to help you make the most of this webinar. If you'd like to access closed captioning, please hit the CC button in the bottom tray and then show subtitles. We love hearing anything you have to say, your thoughts during the webinar, so please participate and make comments at any time via the chat. You can also submit questions using the Q&A function. We will answer if we can during the webinar, but we will also hold the questions we can't answer for dedicated Q&A at the end. And you will receive a certificate of attendance with your webinar recording via Zoom in 24 hours. So before you ask in the chat, I will promise you that you will receive a certificate of attendance and webinar recording via Zoom. So just keep an eye out for that in the next 24 hours or so. And now let's introduce James. So James has over 15 years of experience as an educator, content specialist, instructional coach in K-12 math and science. In his current role at Amplify as Director of STEM Product Specialist, he delivers high-impact motivational presentations and trainings centered on curriculum and pedagogical shifts, e-learning trends, and professional development. He's passionate about improving teaching and learning experiences through research-informed instructional practices, and he is the first person I call when I need someone to present something. So we are very excited he's here today. And with that, James, I will stop sharing and let you take over.
Well, I appreciate it, Shannon. Let's see here. Let me go ahead and get that share going. And while I'm doing that, I threw something in the chat. We'll throw it in there a few times because I know we're all typing too, but I'll also share my screen and make sure that you can access some of the activities that we're going to look at today. So in the chat, there is a link, or you can just follow the instructions here on the screen, where you can go to student.amplify.com/join. Once you get in there, you will see that it's asking for these 6 characters. It is not case specific or space specific. And then go ahead and hit continue without signing in and just throw any name you'd like in there. And if you feel like you're going to be a little silly today and throw inappropriate names in there, it's okay, because I'm going to change all your names to famous mathematicians. Or if you just don't want your math to be seen today, and you kind of want to hide with some anonymity, I'll be able to make sure that no one's going to see what you're doing. I'm not going to put you on blast here. So I know a lot of us are still even filtering into the webinar. We'll drop that link in the chat again. Happy December 15th. I'm assuming for a lot of us, we're on that like home stretch heading into Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever we might celebrate break. It might just be, we might be celebrating the break, right? So I appreciate all of you jumping in and doing some math on a week that, at least when I was teaching, was one of the most stressful weeks to teach because, usually we had a lot of our assessments already done. And we're just trying to keep them entertained. And I think that's a huge theme for what our webinar is all about today. And that is how to sometimes do we feel like we have to entertain students when we're in the classroom. And we're going to kind of dispel some of that and let the math speak for itself. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for just a little bit longer, but I'm going to go out of my slide and go in here and make sure that there's a large amount of us that are getting in. Okay, so I see about 32 of us. I'm going to zoom back in. I'm going to drop the link in the chat again too if you need it. But go ahead and just hit continue without signing in. And for those of you that have gotten in, you might be noticing a really hard-hitting question, and that is choosing your favorite Tom Hanks film. Or if you're not a Tom Hanks fan, you could go ahead and throw your favorite film in there or just make one up. But we appreciate you all joining us today. I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to get in that platform. If we have any late comers or you need to get back in there, just know you can scroll right through the chat and find that link. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen. Let's zoom out and start to look into what we're all saying here. And again, if you need that link, it's in the chat. I'm really curious as we kind of creep on our crowd here on the first day of coming back from winter break. I am seeing some trends. And so, you know what? Let me anonymize you really quick. I promised I would do that, make sure no one's put on blast. But let's look at maybe just some of the trends for our top three. I'm seeing a lot of Castaway, which I'm surprised by because my wife is not a big fan. My wife's joke is, are they ever going to talk in this movie? I said, hey, the volleyball talks. Let's see here. Ooh, some Catch Me If You Can, some Big. I'm already getting some laughs at these terrible jokes, so thank you for that. There's one that's not. Oh, there we go. See this one right here. I do want to know. I was going to call you out, but Fire 2, whomever you might be, you have three of my favorites, and That Thing You Do is absolutely one of mine. Especially if you watch with your kids, it's some great tunes there. So, as you can tell, pretty silly, fun little opener for our day. Before we really get rolling, I always just like to say, hey, the power of Desmos is really unique. Then we're going to actually get to encounter a lot of the power of the Desmos magic in this webinar. But I always just like to clarify, we are in a webinar. We are all over the country, or even sometimes we're not even in this country. We're somewhere else joining us remotely. And just because we're highlighting such incredible digital technology that supports our math curriculum, you do not need to lean on the Desmos magic to truly have the impact with narratives and storytelling that we are going to address today. But being in a webinar, I thought, why not lean into and take advantage of exactly that? And what we're going to do, and I'm so sorry if you're just like so engaged with this activity, but I'm going to pause you for a second. And I'm going to kind of bring you back to the other screen. So I don't know if I'm in a different tab. I don't know if I'm just a voice in your head as you were figuring out what your favorite Tom Hanks movie is. But I would like to start with what exactly I said there at the beginning. And that is, this is a hard week for teachers. A lot of us are done with testing. A lot of us feel like this is like the day after Halloween where the kids are just bouncing off the walls and it's hard to keep them entertained or engaged. I did a little bit of research, and what you're going to see here on the screen, I actually went and found some of the biggest publications around how do we keep students engaged in the classroom. We know that our instructional routines and our math routines, they do help lend ourselves into making sure that we have true discourse, we have true problem solving, we have great collaborative opportunities. And if you see here on the screen, this is just a sampler platter from Chili's of the different types of publications that are out there around how do we hack this engagement issue. This probably could, our whole hour could just be all the different books that would populate or generate from this theme. And I'm going to throw myself under the bus. You know, the first 5 or 6 years of me in the classroom was me exactly saying that in my head. How do I keep my students engaged? But I was using entertained in my head. So I'm going to show you exactly what I looked like in some scenarios as a teacher. Of course, I dressed up quite odd when it was state assessment time or when it was Halloween time. I was like, you know what? They'd rather hear from this guy in this really cool sweatshirt than how I was dressing. Or maybe if you're a Ninja Turtle fan, it would be easier to tune in to today's lesson. And I chose this image specifically because you might see some turtles come into play. Or my alter ego as an instructor was DJ Four Eyes, which was my sweet DJ name, where I would try and play music during lessons or at our community events. And even if I was just trying to do bus duty, it was always trying to keep my kids entertained. And I was always asking the question, are you not entertained? And I think this is a rookie mistake. And a lot of you are probably nodding your heads. Like, I remember when I first started teaching, I just wanted to be enjoyable and I wanted to make the math that students don't think is enjoyable more entertaining. And that is not going to need to be the case. Instead, when you're looking at tasks, whether they be curricular or not, it's all about those strong tasks. And so today, I know a lot of you joined our webinar because it truly was around the narratives and storytelling that weaves itself throughout Amplify Desmos Math. And you might be a prospective school, a prospective district, or a current user, and you're just curious about how you've been seeing or want to see this level of engagement in the classroom. So I'm going to start somewhere quite interesting. I'm going to start with grade 2. And what you're going to see here on the screen, this is Bonita. And Bonita comes from a unit that is extremely popular in our program. And that's because this unit focuses on really how we make tens, how we decompose numbers, how numbers are hiding inside numbers, and using that in a storyline. So for any of you that are looking at Amplify Desmos Math as a curriculum or a potential suitor in your district, one of the things I always like to lean into to start with is if you're in pre-K or TK, all the way up through 5th grade, we actually have unit stories or unit read-alouds. So for example, in this unit, this is Mr. Roy, and you might be looking at that image right now, and you might be saying, wait, is that Mr. Roy or is that James, the host of this webinar? I know I look just like him. I could have thrown on that beautiful sweater vest today, but I left it in my closet. Now, in this unit storyline, Bonita is really trying her hardest to speak up. She's a student that really isn't neurotypical, and she does stay quiet a lot in the classroom, but she does have a strong feeling about the new class pet that her class is voting on. And here in this quick story, she does spend a lot of time defending why they should change their vote to a millipede. Now, you might be thinking, why would anyone want to vote on a millipede? Well, in this story, and I will show you here on this screen, teachers, you have a beautiful set of screens to be able to facilitate these read alouds. These come straight from the platform. Teachers, you have that read aloud in your teacher's edition as well. But what it really does is it builds context for the students as they weave throughout the lessons in that unit. And spoiler alert, by the end of this unit, the class does vote for that millipede, and Bonita is very excited. One of the images I'd like to show you in a teacher's edition in our program is look at all the different times that Bonita and Mr. Roy and the connections between that unit story, how often they weave themselves throughout the lessons and activities in just that unit. And so as students are tackling tasks or they're attempting to really dive into a specific problem set, this is going to give them context as to why they're doing what they're doing. For example, I'm going to show you right up here at the very top, I'm going to open up a lesson. And this is a print-based lesson. I'm going to just kind of zoom in over here and notice the lesson titles as we look at working with different bar graphs and data in Mr. Roy's class. Even though it's a print-based lesson, you can see that we're still talking about Mr. Roy's class as we're graphing and we're thinking about the data that we're collecting. It all still ties itself back into that unit story. Now, for the time being, I know a lot of you logged in, or if you just got here, we'll drop that link in again. But I'd love for you to see. Thanks. Faith is already on it. Look at that. Faith should do all of my webinars. This is just great. I'm going to go back to our lesson. And if you go to that lesson where your screen is paused, I'd like to, kind of start us with just 2 or 3 screens around Bonita. So again, this is ways to make 10 in grade 2. And I'm going to restrict your screen. So if you're on the right tab, you're going to notice that you're getting sucked into a story that has Bonita walking with a millipede. So I could see a large amount of you have joined us there. And I'm going to unpause you. And on your screen, you're going to be able to see a quick little video of Bonita walking through a forest. Now, Bonita had this dream that her millipede couldn't get to the other side of the tree stump where Millie, the millipede's favorite food is at. So in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should notice that you can go ahead and click next. And you all are going to be able to help Millie get to Millie's food. See a lot of you doing it right now. But as you're doing that, I'm going to implore you to do some problems wrong. So as you notice that we're working with more of a fluency-based activity, I'd like you to see the Desmos magic come to life. So go ahead and get some problems wrong. I'm going to get one wrong as well. I think a lot of us can make 10s in this group. So go ahead and notice that responsive feedback that happens. And I chose this to start our journey of telling a story and how narratives weave throughout our program. I chose this one because oftentimes we think that the procedural side is not tied to storytelling. Because when we're doing those procedures, we actually think of more just like fast facts, right? Number talks, those types of things. But they absolutely can help support the sense making around even things like making a 10. And I'm going to go ahead and come back out here and kind of look at what the group is up to. I see some of you have moved along to even the next screen, and I can see a lot of you and what you're up to on my screen. So notice some of you starting to feed in here. And if you notice just those 2 screens, now we started very thin slice. We're going to get into a bigger picture of storytelling here in a second. But you're just looking at a thin slice of how storytelling could even support a fluency-based activity. And for a lot of you, you might have noticed that once you complete or make your 4 sets of 10, that Millie's going to be able to get across and eat their favorite food. Oh, I love this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this screen. I'm going to bring you back to me for just a second. I love to tell a quick story of my own. And if you'd like, I'm going to sync you to me so that on your screen, you're seeing what I see. And basically, I just want you all to see how lovely my family looks. So I've pulled you all into a picture of my 3 daughters and my wife and I. And if you want, take a second, do a little bit of a notice and wonder. Let's use a different routine. What do you think is going on with our outfits here? Why are we dressed the way we're dressed? You might be like, James, I have no idea why all 3 of your daughters are dressed completely different. Or you might start to be thinking, oh, I think I know exactly what this has to do with. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't figured it out yet, myself and my whole family, we are big Swifties. We are big Taylor Swift fans, and we're all dressed in different eras here. Now, if you don't know this, one of our last Super Bowls, Taylor Swift's fiance was playing in that Super Bowl. And I asked my daughters, I said, are you going to come downstairs for our Super Bowl party? I'd really like for you to mingle with our friends and family. Their number one answer was, is Taylor Swift going to be at the Super Bowl? Of course, that was their number one question. So if you don't know the story, Taylor Swift was actually in Tokyo 2 days before the Vegas Super Bowl. And so I all of a sudden had this epiphany of, oh my gosh, do you remember when we were in school and you'd get that problem in fifth grade that said, if you're on a bullet train and you're in Singapore and the bullet train's going X amount of miles per hour and you need to get to Beijing, they just never really gave us any context that we could relate to. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a lot of bullet trains in Arizona, so I had no connection to that math. Well, because of what happened with this Super Bowl, Taylor Swift actually gave us some reasoning behind why we would care about a problem like that. And so you can see here, it says, if a plane leaves Tokyo at 11:30, will they actually make it to Las Vegas in time, right? And what I found quite comical is, of course, the Embassy of Japan actually did the math for us. But I did let my daughters see this. I even found schools all over the country on Twitter that were doing the math. And I love seeing this. This is a fourth grade class in Minnesota, them actually tackling this problem, a problem that usually nobody wants to see. And Faith will go ahead and drop that in there for you, Larissa. So what did I do? I did exactly what everyone else was doing across the country. I made my 3 daughters run over to the island and do the math. I've never seen 3 kids so excited to do a math problem in their entire life. And that is because they 100% were only going to come downstairs for this party if they got to see Taylor Swift. They were also very familiar with whenever Taylor Swift is at a game, you get to see her nonstop. So they were very excited. Also, you can tell right here, my daughters don't have a true sense of how long it would really take to clean and pack and leave Tokyo. They only gave Taylor about 2 hours of packing and driving and TSA time. But long story short, she had plenty of time to make the Super Bowl. So why do I go through this? Land that plane, James. Well, when you see stuff like this in a program, a math program, where the storyline actually helps students drive themselves to a solution, they will care way more about tackling that solution. So what I'd love to do is I'm going to go ahead and sync you to me. I'm going to unpause you. But before I do that, what I'd like to put up on the screen is a new story. So I've jumped into a third grade example. I noticed a lot of elementary in the room today. This is a third grade story, and I chose this one because of my really fun Tom Hanks opener. So I'm just going to show you one image of this story, and I'm going to give you the synopsis. Remember, these are about 7 to 10 minute read alouds. Then the rest of the unit, you never read it, but it does help students throughout. So in this read aloud, students find out about a student where this student and her mom bought a brand new house. Or when I say brand new, it was new to them, but it was used. And there was a former tenant. And for any of you that have ever seen Forrest Gump, what was really unique about this storyline for me is it reminded me of Forrest Gump's mom. And you remember Forrest Gump's mom had a very large house, and they would rent out different rooms or have people staying in different rooms at different times. Well, in this story, we find out that there were different people that stayed in different rooms. They rented out the different rooms, and they would decorate those rooms based on their personalities or their professions. And so what happens in this story is we basically are renovating, and I believe her name is Sherry. Yep, we're basically renovating different rooms in Sherry's home when we think about area and multiplication and perimeter. But as we're renovating these different rooms, we're learning about the different tenants that used to stay there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and unpause your screens, and I'm just going to have you sync to me. So the first thing you're going to notice is for anyone that is on the lesson page, you're getting pulled in to a screen that looks like this. And all it says is click the arrows to look at each room in Sherry's house. And the other thing I like to point out as you're doing this warm-up, all we're doing is a notice and wonder routine. What do I notice? What do I wonder as students are working in that screen? And you might also notice there's really no math here other than observational. Like, what do I see as I'm looking at the different rooms? And for teachers, if you're curious, anytime I need support on how to facilitate one of these routines in Amplify Desmos Math, my teacher's edition is also right down here at the bottom of my screen. So if I'm on a device, I could see everything from those notice and wonders and think, pair, shares, and the tell your story routines. They're all at point of use at the teacher moves tab at the very bottom. So I'm going to continue to have you paste on my screen. And all you can see here is we're just looking at different rooms in Sherry's house. You might be noticing different things on different rooms. So I'm going to go ahead and pull you into the next screen. And on the next screen, you'll notice I jumped to activity 2 in this lesson. So if you notice, you can drag that little radial button. And what it's saying is the distance between 2 tick marks is 1 foot. Drag the point to show one way to decompose the unpainted space to determine the area. So when we think about decomposing figures, or you think all the way back to that second grade activity with numbers hiding inside numbers, that strategy also makes a lot of sense with an activity like this from third grade, where we're understanding that that flexible thinking of numbers. And so there are many ways or many answers to how we could decompose this figure. So once you've decomposed it or broken it apart the way you would like to be able to determine the area, we're going to go ahead and click you into the next screen. So dependent on how you decomposed your screen, you are now going to see that new table broken up to where you will need to figure out the area between each part. And if we haven't made sense here, this is some area that we need to paint. And so we're really trying to figure out the space that Sherry and her mom need to be able to paint that new wall. I'm going to go ahead and see how we're doing here. Let me go over to my teacher's screen. This is awesome. Now, I know some of you are probably doing the math while also maybe listening to me. If you have 2 monitors and you're watching me and also doing the math, that's great as well. But what I really like here is that I can see all the different ways that you all broke apart these figures. If I have any 5th grade teachers in here, you're probably loving this activity because you're seeing those early progressions of those skills when we think about solving for even volume. These are early skills on exactly how to do so. But the students aren't saying, why am I breaking this apart? Like, what is the point behind this? Instead, students might be saying to themselves, oh, I'm doing this because I need to know, the area on which I'm painting. Like, how many feet do I need? Maybe I'm going to be determining that unpainted space, and I need to allot for how much paint I'm going to be buying. This is going to help support the sense making around this math. Now, just because I love showing off these tools, I'm going to pause your screens. And some of you are doing some great labeling, by the way, because as a former 3rd grade teacher, labeling always seemed to be an afterthought for my students. What I'd love to do really quick here is I'm going to just show a few different ways of thinking that I saw as you were all working. So if you see up on my screen, I just went ahead and I grabbed some different ways that you all broke apart that wall to be able to, figure out the area. And so this is also a great tool within the program called Snapshots. When I think about, for any of you fans of the 5 practices for orchestrating discourse in the classroom, one of the hard things about that title is, a lot of programs, they don't let you know what to select in sequence when you're finding different representations. Amplify Desmos Math does a great job of that with our differentiated tables, and it'll help you quickly identify them once you're looking for them, where to present it. So I'm going to unpause you again. Let's go and sync you just to one more screen here and notice the progressions of this this skill. So now you're noticing it says complete as many challenges as you like. You're going to see that you can use different tools here to be able to fill the area of paint on the wall. And as you're doing that, I'm going to kind of do a little narration or talk over a task like this. So to go all the way back to Sherry's read aloud, we're going to actually build a shed in that unit. We're going to retile her kitchen floor in that unit. We're going to have to put area rugs in her living room. And so you're going to get a lot of different at-bats to really test your understanding of area and multiplication with area. And so this is just a few screens where students are going to be able to have that interconnectedness between that read aloud story or that narrative and how it shows itself up in Amplify Desmos Math. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of creeping here and see what you all have been putting on some of your responses. Oh, this is great. I noticed some of you have already gotten to some other challenges as well. I see a lot of item types like this on our state assessments. I'm sure there's some head nods as soon as I said that. So this is a really heavily tested concept. And so I thought it would be really advantageous for us to launch into a task like this. So let me go ahead and do a little framing before we move into an upper grade concept. So I appreciate all the math. I hope that, when you were joining a webinar today, you were like, oh my gosh, it's so great that we actually got to do some math, because that's how I always like to engage with webinars, is actually having the opportunity to do and not listen. So hopefully you're seeing some of the power behind the tasks that we're looking at. I jumped all the way up to an 8th grade example, and your screens are probably paused. I see some of you on different tabs. Maybe you're watching me and bouncing back and forth, but for a majority of us, I see that we're in this activity. Now, before we jump into it, one of the other heavily used routines in Amplify Desmos Math is, and I'll go ahead and show you down here, when we're launching these activities, you'll be able to utilize routines like tell me a story. So these routines are great ways for students to springboard into the lessons. All of the warm-ups in Amplify Desmos Math, your students can do. They are tasks that wherever their math background or their mathematical journey has taken them, it is okay if you are, that high flyer or that student that is still trying to catch up. Every student can do our warm-up. For example, I'm going to unpause you and keep you on the screen. I cannot wait to hear read some of your stories. And you'll notice it says, press play, watch the animation, and then tell a story based on what you see. And as that's playing, I mentioned pre-K or TK to 5th grade. There are unit stories that help support the lessons as you move throughout the units. When we get to 6th grade through high school, we don't lose the storytelling. We don't lose the narratives, but they happen more often than not at the lesson level from the beginning. Now, I will tell you, there are a lot of lessons in our program around turtles. You saw that picture of me dressed as a turtle. But here we're just wanting students, based on their own ideas, their own silliness, their own creativity, they are writing their own stories. And I have to read some of these. So I'm going to go ahead and snag a few. Oh, these. Oh, these are great. These are really, really great. What I'm really happy about, and I'm just being selfish, is even after today's webinar, I can go back in and continue to read, and I'll have access to all your silly stories. I'm going to grab 3 that I just really, really liked. Now, I'm going to grab these three, but as I'm doing that, there's another reason why I like the tell me a story uh, routine. And that's because when we think about informal and formal language that we're asking students to use, um, what's really nice about these warm-ups is we do lean into the fact that students are going to use any vocabulary, whether it be mathematical or more of that observational, everyday street math words. uh, we can really highlight and focus when students are using terms like rate versus maybe a less common synonym. So here I could see some great stories. The rabbit was faster, but he stopped and had a slower average speed at the end of the race. The turtle kept a constant rate. So see exactly right there. We could definitely start to maybe do like some umbrella vocabulary and start to write up on the wards where we're documenting a board. We could document that informal and formal language as we see it in action. So that's another thing I really like about this snapshot tool is being able to see the work or the words that you're using as we move throughout. So the next piece here, I grabbed a lot of screens from just this 8th grade lesson because what I really want you to see is even if you don't have the unit stories in pre-K to 5th grade, you're going to notice the scaffolded approach in utilizing the tortoise and hare story, that familiar story that many of us know, using it as a springboard into supporting students around the type of math that we're tackling. And we think mostly, around distance and time and things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to pace your screens. I would give you the opportunity to go through multiple screens, but I'd like to go a little slow on some of these. So let's go ahead and move you into the next screen. And again, if anyone needs the link to the activity, we'll throw it in the chat again. But now you're going to notice that as we tell our story, you can start to put things on the graph. So based on the story that we saw, could we label those graphs where, you might think, okay, the tortoise, I wonder if the tortoise is this one, and I wonder if the hare is this one. Explain your thinking. Well, I think we all saw that the hare took a big break and took a big nap. And so that might not make sense during this portion on the x-axis between about, let's say 6 and 10. So you're going to be able to see that labeling and how you can move across and explain your thinking. Another tool you might not have noticed when it says explain your thinking, when we think about the accessibility features in Amplify Desmos Math, students could upload a picture. Maybe they're doing the math in their print consumable text, or they want to record their voice and tell you a story using their inflection and their pausing and their pacing. Think about not letting your students type their story on the last screen and actually telling you a story. That's another really cool feature in here where you can record your voice and actually orally describe anything. Maybe it's describing a function or describing the way you solved an expression. All right, so let's go ahead to the next screen. And again, keep remembering where we started and where we're going as we think about the roles of this storytelling in mathematics. So now you're being sucked into a new story called The Fox. And here, that story is told through a graphical representation. And so this graph is actually showing you a third animal has been brought to the mix. That third animal has been brought to the mix. And so what would happen here in this fox's storyline? And so you have the opportunity to now tell a new animal's story. And in this specific activity, I would actually have students paired up 2 to 1. I'd love for students to be telling their story and crafting that story together. And one, that generates a lot more conversation in the classroom. And based on students' backgrounds or their knowledge around the tortoise and the hare, or some might have a strong literacy background. They might lean more into different elements of this lesson than others. I'm going to just point out a few here because these are fantastic. Some got super mathy. The fox gave them a head start and then sped up to surpass both hare and tortoise, finishing 1,600 meters in 10 seconds. Ooh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Or how about this one? The fox didn't move until 6 minutes. Fox moved really fast and caught up to the tortoise and hare at time 9 o'clock. Then it passed them. Glad he didn't eat either of them. These are great. Oh, I love this. And again, I love that many of you are utilizing that informal or formal language. So I'm going to come back to the student view. And before I do that, another feature that you might not be familiar with Amplify Desmos Math, if you look up in the top right of my screen, there's a little icon. And that icon right up here says companion mode. Oftentimes when teachers are not wanting students to do things in print and they want them to do it digital, they have the fear of being stuck to their device. Like they don't want to be stuck to that laptop for that lesson. Companion mode gives you the ability to just scan a QR code with your cellular phone or your iPad, and you can walk the room and pause and pace and sync students to your lessons using that phone. So a really cool tool if you did not know that existed. So I'm going to pull you all into the reveal. So the reveal is now going to show students how the story from the previous screen actually compares to the race. So how students' stories around the fox, how it actually compared to what really happened. And I did see a lot of stories around the fox took a 6-second nap. So some of you nailed that, because if you notice, that fox was sitting right at the starting line, just lying down there. So really nice job for the nap call outs, which some of you are probably thinking, oh, I'm going to take a nap after listening to James for the last hour. I hope that's not true. But so let's move on into activity 2 here. Now we're doing a lot of just true and false stuff that you would see a lot in high stakes assessments. Choose all the true statements that go with the graph. And because of time, I'm going to keep us moving. And then it says, next, the tortoise raced a dog. So go ahead and use the line feature on the top of your screen. It's the second one next to the pencil. And you could go ahead and create a race where you think the dog might have done X, Y, or Z. Of course, I didn't read any of the parameters because I don't want to give it away. But it says sketch a graph representing the relationship between distance and time. For a lot of us, and especially in the middle school setting, this is the type of math we do a lot in 6-8. So there are a lot of different supports that you'll need to provide here to make sure that the progression of that skill continues. But this is a very important skill as we think about translating parameters or criteria like this new dog or this new animal, which is a dog. And then once you do that, so it says the dog got a head start but lost the race. The dog and tortoise were tied at 800 meters. The dog's distance was decreasing for 3 minutes. Let's go ahead and give you the opportunity to then translate it into the next screen. And I am going to pace you so that you have the opportunity if you need to go back to that screen. I'm going to now go ahead and pace you to where you can see. There we go. You can see the subsequent activities that go with it. So we were all looking at dog versus tortoise. So dog versus tortoise. So depending on how you drew your dog graph, let's see, dog got a head start. So let's just, I'm gonna get it wrong, but just a little bit. 800. Dog's distance was decreasing for 3 minutes. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. All right. And then when I go to my next screen, you'll see that my graph is there, and it will show you, if you haven't noticed, it is going to show your dog to show up randomly. Now, I immediately know I got mine wrong because my dog didn't have a head start. And I'd have some great questions I could ask that student. Question one, did your dog have a head start? And so you're noticing, based on how you drew your graph, that's going to determine what the dog looks like now as you have that conceptual or visual representation alongside the graph off to the right. And as we progress into that next screen, the blue graph shows what Ash drew to represent the dog's race. At least one of the following statements is not true. And so I'm able to, again, compare other student work with that student representation. I see a lot of you are kind of working through and just seeing how the rest of this lesson would end. If you are not familiar with our 6-8 Amplify Desmos Math program, we have a lot of different turtles that come into play, like turtle time trials is another great lesson that we have in here. It seems to make a lot of sense when we think about distance and time specifically. But here's my bumper sticker before we kind of do a final reflection here. I hope that the big picture, the big takeaway is that regardless of what grade we're in, anytime that we can make the math relatable, and oftentimes we are always trying to make math relatable to the student as far as, hey, remember when you were racing somebody that was much slower than you? No, no, no. Instead, we can put it in the context of true storytelling and narratives. And Amplify Desmos Math does a really good job of eliminating that student hand that goes up and says, why are we doing this? Because I think just with the second, the third, and the eighth grade activities that you looked at today, you always knew why you were tackling the problem, the task that was set in front of you. And so with Amplify Desmos Math, they do a really good job of that. There's a new publication, and I'm going to sync you to me and kind of just do a culminating final thought here. And let me make sure that I have this all on the right screen. Okay, there it is. Okay, so on your screen, you're going to see a very comical check all that apply. But more importantly, if you want to write this down or take a screenshot, there's a new NCTM update to the Teaching Mathematics Through Problem Solving book. One of the reasons I bring this up is if you go look at this new NCTM publication, you will actually find a lot of references to the tasks that are in Amplify Desmos Math. And so I think this is something that is really strong when you think about all the different ways and benefits of storytelling and narratives in the classroom. If you haven't, and I just realized I did a checkbox for my instructions, didn't mean to do that. But just to kind of go down the list, 100% increased engagement and motivation. They're going to provide context. They're going to provide purpose for your students. And big picture here is when we use these types of tasks, students actually see it as actually meaningful and less abstract when they're doing those tasks. For improved conceptual understanding. Improved conceptual I think this is somewhat self-explanatory, but when we create these situations, those coherent situations, it really does, again, help students make sense of the why behind those procedures. That's actually why I chose that procedural second grade activity first, because when we're making a 10 and we're seeing that numbers hide inside numbers like that, they actually knew why you were doing it, because you were trying to help the millipede with different measurements or different lengths get to that final outcome. It also really helps with reducing math anxiety. And I can tell you from a lot of the work that I've done with some of my peers and colleagues around, especially students that are neurodiverse, it helps with reducing that math anxiety. It helps humanize the mathematics for them and framing them around those characters or real world situations makes them feel less intimidated to take on complex ideas. And then that really kind of pivots or piggybacks off of supporting diverse learners. What it really will do is based on, regardless of your math background, when you were writing that story around what happened with the tortoise and hare, you don't need to know the tale as old as time. You could have written your own story and you had no background or framing around it. So it does leverage those language structures for students and their experiences, but also is going to provide them with a lot of different entry points into their mathematical reasoning. And then just four more here. I think these are all extremely important. One, when I mentioned have students paired 2-to-1, this could generate a wealth of discourse opportunities. When I have students predicting outcomes or explaining their reasoning as to why they drew the dog graph the way they drew it, we're really justifying our solutions. And so leveraging the technology to leverage those conversations is exactly what I hope you saw in some of these tasks. And then better retention and transfer. We are 100% wired to remember stories. Why do you think I told you that story about the bullet train that went from Singapore to wherever it went? That's because I remember that story and I remember being like, why are we doing this? Why do I need to get to this other city on a bullet train? But when we connect it through that narrative, they're going to be more likely to retain those ideas and transfer it to new contexts or new situations. And then the last two, development of problem solving skills, straight from the book, honestly. When you present these authentic problems that require the sense making, require decision making and perseverance, and then we mirror it with how the math is used outside the classroom, this is the game changer. Instead of making it an isolated experience and instead having them see and develop those skills with real world situations, this is key. And then last but not least, positive mathematical identity, which I don't think should be last. It should be maybe first. But when we see ourselves reflected in the stories and scenarios, when we have the opportunity, whether it be telling our own story or connecting it to our own cultural backgrounds, they're more likely to see themselves as actual mathematicians. And so that's another reason why we turn you into mathematicians as soon as we can. Because we want to strengthen that confidence and long-term engagement when it comes to mathematics. So, of course, this was a check all of the above. I hope this was meaningful. I hope that made sense to you all. You all spent a Monday afternoon with me, so I cannot thank you enough. There was over 100 of you. So happy Monday. I appreciate you all as we head into our stressful week before the big holiday break. So I appreciate everyone, and hopefully you got something out of this. And if you're watching the recording, hopefully you are enjoying it Christmas Eve with your family around the Christmas tree, watching me talk about narratives and storytelling. So that's my day. Appreciate it, Shannon.
Thank you so much, James. I don't see any questions that have come in, which is nice. And I know, James, you are always on the move and ready to go to an airport, to go to another place to give another wonderful presentation. But let me share my screen really quickly let's see. Oh, can you see my screen? Can anyone see it? I don't see it.
Not yet.
Oh, all right, hold on 1 second. Okay, perfect. So if there are no questions, which is always nice, I put in the chat some more math resources from Amplify. You can register if you liked this webinar. We have more webinars coming in January, all about fluency. These are for K-5, but I'm sure that you will find something for every grade. And we also will be giving free fluency activities within almost every session, so that is good. Explore hundreds of free, ready-to-use math activities to use tomorrow at amplify.com/classroom. Download our free holiday-themed K-8 math activity, Feasting on Figures. It is beautifully designed by our design team and our own Ryan Lovins, who you usually see on screen. This was his brainchild, and they are just so beautiful. So please, it's program agnostic. You can use it no matter your curriculum, and it might be good with getting those kids to focus near the end of the year. and access some of our most popular math routines through amplify.com/mathroutines. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. James, thank you. I always appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. So we will see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.